Every day, all day, we take in messages through our senses.
These bits of information that we can see, hear, touch, count, or measure, we call data. Our brains process this information and we respond in various ways.
I am never doing that again. That was fun. Let's do it again.
Some sensory messages we hardly notice. We've received the message so many times before that we handle it automatically.
Some responses to sensory messages are more deliberate.
Other times, we have to stop and think about it for a minute, then consciously figure out how to respond.
There's so much data around us each day that we can't possibly think about it all. But if something's important to us or interesting, we pay attention to it. Oftentimes we ask questions because we want to know more about it.
We often make a hypothesis or an educated guess about what we think the answer might be. Then, gather more information to see if we were right.
Sometimes we can get the answer just by asking someone who knows.
So how tall is this thing?
It's about 50 feet to the deck.
Is this safe?
Today we did all the inspections and we've taken the proper safety precautions.
If we do that, it's important to evaluate our sources to make sure they're reliable.
Other times, we have to experiment to figure out the answers to our questions.
So, how'd you guys figure out how to climb up the pirate raid?
Well, first we talked it out, and then we tried working together.
Nice. Anything in specific?
Well, we tried a few things that didn't work, but then I stepped on Sean's shoulders and his knee and I got up.
Awesome.
This process, noticing pieces of data, asking questions, gathering data to answer the questions, and drawing conclusions is the same process we use in science.
According to the rules of science, we can only use data that can be perceived by our senses. In other words, things that can be seen, heard, touched, counted, or measured.
What about the things we can smell or taste?
Yep, those too.
In the 1790s, a priest named Spallanzani noticed bats flying and wondered how they could navigate in complete darkness.
Wondering if bats use something besides their sight to navigate well, he decided to perform some fascinating experiments. He discovered that blind bats could navigate around obstacles successfully, but that bats with their heads covered could not. He concluded that bats use something besides their sight to navigate successfully.
It's important to be able to repeat experiments to see if your results are the same every time. The more data you gather, the more confidence you can have in your conclusion.
Another scientist then discovered that bats with wax earplugs did not navigate very well.
But maybe a bat with a plug in its ear is just too uncomfortable to navigate very well.
To test this, Spallanzani glued little brass tubes into the ears of two groups of bats. In the first group, the tubes were left open so the bats could hear. In the second group, the tubes were closed so the bats couldn't hear.
Both groups had the same amount of discomfort and extra weight, but one group could hear and the other could not.
The group that could hear was just about as successful at navigating as bats with no tubes in their ears at all.
He concluded that bats' navigational ability has something to do with their ears. Science is all about gathering data about things that are interesting or important to us.
And interpreting that data to figure out what it means or why it's important to us.
Data is important at two places in the scientific process: the data we notice to begin with, and the data we gather in answer to our questions and experiments.
Interpretation is important at two different places in the scientific process too. Our hypothesis is kind of like a preliminary interpretation. Then, we gather more data to see if the hypothesis holds up. If not, we draw a different conclusion.
Interpretations made based on a lot of data are stronger than interpretations made based on just a little bit of data.
Let's review.
Data are facts, pieces of information, things we can see, hear, touch, count, or measure.
Explanations of what the data mean or why it's important are called interpretations. Sometimes there can be more than one interpretation of the same set of data.
The scientific process is all about gathering data about things that are interesting or important to us.
And interpreting that data in ways that make sense to us.